welcome to the deep dive. You've shared this really quite thought-provoking collection with us, insights from Jim O'Shaughnessy's Twitter thread. And we're going to use that today as our sort of launching pad.
Sounds good.
Think of this as a direct look into how your own mind works, maybe why you believe the things you do.
Right.
So our mission,
Yeah.
to kind of distill these powerful ideas about the thinker and the prover,
Yeah.
give you a shortcut maybe to some deeper self-awareness.
Exactly. And what we have here really is a way to get a handle on a pretty fundamental part of how we think.
Yeah.
The core idea comes from O'Shaughnessy, but he's drawing on Robert Anton Wilson's work, which itself was inspired by Dr. Leonard Orr,
Okay.
is that we can, usefully think of the mind as having these two key parts,
Yeah.
the thinker and the prover.
Right, the thinker and the prover.
Now, obviously, it's a simplification. George Box, the statistician, famously said, all models are wrong.
But some are useful. Yeah, I know that one.
And this model, it turns out to be surprisingly useful. It gives us some powerful insights.
And what's so interesting to me is how easy it feels to spot this dynamic in other people.
Oh, absolutely.
You see someone clinging to a belief, evidence doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's obvious. But turning that lens back on ourselves, on our own minds.
That's where it gets tricky and much more interesting, arguably.
Yeah, and O'Shaughnessy really emphasizes this affects everyone. You listening, me, everyone. Understanding this is kind of key to seeing things more clearly.
So let's start with the thinker. What's it actually doing?
Okay.
Essentially, it's the part of your mind that can imagine, anything. It's constantly soaking up information, right? From your childhood, social circles, what you read, watch.
Those sorts of inputs.
All sorts. And here's a really key point. The thinker often feels like its thoughts are totally original, like brand new ideas it just came up with.
It weaves all this stuff together.
Yeah.
And presents it as, your unique take. But it's also incredibly good at coloring your perception of reality. Like O'Shaughnessy points out, you can give two thinkers the same facts, and one sees sunshine and roses, the other sees doom and gloom. Depends on their whole framework.
Allows for totally different ideologies, different interpretations of, everything.
Exactly.
Okay, so then the prover steps in. Now, once the thinker decides something's true, could be anything. The prover's job is simple.
Find the proof.
Find the evidence to back it up. That's it. It doesn't really care how the thinker got there. It just gets to work confirming it.
So the key thing for you listening is that your own view of reality is probably being actively shaped right now to confirm what you already think.
Often completely outside your awareness.
Yeah. It's like your mind just puts on these special glasses, these filters.
Yeah.
And it's not just about noticing certain facts.
No, it goes deeper.
The prover ties these beliefs right into your emotions, your sense of who you are. They become those core beliefs, the hills you'll die on, like O'Shaughnessy calls them.
Yeah.
Because they feel so fundamental.
Precisely.
Right.
Because the prover's whole function is validation, not, critical thinking about the belief itself. It bypasses skepticism.
Right.
Things that just aren't challenged, as O'Shaughnessy says, they just become invisible, part of the background reality.
It's all part of our, what did you call it? Our human O's.
Yeah, Brian Rimmel's term, our installed human operating system is just running.
And to grasp how automatic this is, how hidden, that analogy from Donald Hoffman is great. Our perception is like a computer desktop.
Right, the user interface.
So what we see, what we interact with, but it hides all the messy code underneath. The thinker and prover are like that code, running unseen.
And what's really fascinating is how the prover actually uses our own neurology, our brain wiring, to strengthen these beliefs. O'Shaughnessy mentions the RAS, the reticular activating system.
Ah, yeah. Is that the thing like you buy a specific car?
And suddenly you see that exact car everywhere.
Yes, that's it.
That's your RAS filtering your senses, highlighting what's suddenly relevant to you. The prover hijacks that same system for beliefs. It zooms in on confirming info, makes it feel like overwhelming evidence.
Wow. Okay. So we've got this picture. Thinker creates ideas. Prover finds proof, often unconsciously. Now, why should you, listening right now, really care about this? What's the practical payoff?
Well, O'Shaughnessy argues, and I think he's right, that just recognizing this software in our human OS is incredibly useful for understanding yourself and for understanding others.
Okay.
But the crucial first step really is accepting it applies to you. It's easy to spot bias in others, right? To see their prover working overtime.
Oh, yeah, piece of cake.
But the real breakthrough, acknowledging you're running the same program.
It reminds me of that Anthony DeMello quote. A good way to discover your shortcomings is to observe what irritates you in others.
That's a great connection, exactly.
Right.
When you see someone being stubborn, maybe check if your own thinker prover is doing something similar somewhere else.
Good point.
And understanding this also sheds light on why changing someone's mind is often so hard, especially with deeply held emotional beliefs.
Right.
O'Shaughnessy notes that when those core perceptions get challenged, it often skips the logic circuits entirely. It triggers an emotional reaction, fight or flight almost.
Oh, that totally explains online arguments. People get so defensive, so dug in. It's not just facts being debated. It feels personal. Existential even.
It does. Like O'Shaughnessy quotes Kipling, we end up like islands of different beliefs shouting at each other over seas of misunderstanding.
Wow.
Because when emotions are tied in, the prover builds this super strong reality tunnel. That's Robert Anton Wilson's term.
Reality tunnel, I like that.
Contradictory facts, they just ping off it. They don't even register sometimes. Knowing this can save you a ton of frustration trying to argue someone out of an emotional conviction.
Yeah, logic isn't the right tool there.
Often not, and this leads to what O'Shaughnessy calls filter failure.
Filter failure.
Yeah, when the beliefs become so rigid, so charged, the prover just blocks out too much. Useful, important information gets filtered out. You get stuck. Dogma sets in.
Intellectual stagnation, kind of?
Wilson had a starker term. He sometimes called it being intellectually brain dead, basically. The inability to take in, process, and share information effectively because the filters are locked down.
Oof. Strong words.
Think about, say, deeply fundamentalist views throughout history. O'Shaughnessy suggests looking at belief systems you personally find rigid makes it easier to see the mechanism.
Right. Those filters stop adaptation, block other views.
And historically, that inflexibility often hasn't led to the best outcomes, socially speaking.
Okay, so that's individuals. But what happens when lots of people's provers start marching in the same direction?
Then you get consensus reality, a shared understanding built by many provers following similar thinker paths. And that can be incredibly powerful for good or ill.
Depends on the consensus, I guess.
Exactly. O'Shaughnessy uses historical examples. Middle Ages. Challenge the church's reality tunnel, you could be in serious trouble, fatal trouble.
High stakes.
But contrast that with, say, the dawn of the PC revolution. Challenging the consensus view of computing, like a Steve Jobs did, could lead to huge innovation. Reward instead of risk.
So the consensus itself shapes the consequences of challenging it.
Mm-hmm. And that consensus building was massively influenced by mass media. Radio, movies, especially TV.
Oh, absolutely. TV was huge.
Because, as O'Shaughnessy points out, our human OS, our basic wiring, isn't great at telling reality from fiction on a screen. We react emotionally, viscerally.
Makes those mediums incredibly powerful shapers of thought.
Yeah.
Activating provers on a massive scale.
You got it. Think about the pre-internet world. It felt like there was more agreement, right? Fewer channels, more controlled narratives.
Yeah, it seemed more unified, maybe?
Yeah.
On the surface?
On the surface. But O'Shaughnessy correctly notes that was partly an illusion. Plenty of subgroups held different beliefs. They were just less visible. Geographically isolated, or maybe their ideas were outside the Overton window.
A range of acceptable public discourse.
Rang, the internet, social media. Suddenly, anyone can broadcast anything to everyone. No filters, no gatekeepers in the same way.
Which sounds great in theory. Democracy of information.
But in practice, information overload. Noise. Chaos, sometimes. O'Shaughnessy calls it the largest social experiment ever.
And we're all living in it. So how do people react psychologically to this flood?
Well, one common reaction is overwhelm, and then maybe retreat. People pull back into simpler, more familiar belief systems. They seek out tribes, online community.
Where their provers feel safe and validated. Everyone agrees.
Exactly. Which unfortunately seems to be contributing to some of the societal fragmentation we see today. Echo chambers get reinforced.
Depressing. Is that just it then? Are we doomed to fragment?
Well, O'Shaughnessy suggests, no, it's not inevitable. There's hope. But it requires consciously re-engaging our thinkers, taking back control.
Okay, how? Where do we start?
He points to Robert Anton Wilson's advice. And the first step is actually pretty simple, maybe deceptively so.
Which is?
Start by observing the thinker and prover dynamic in other people. Just watch.
Because it's easier to see it externally first.
Much easier. And the key, O'Shaughnessy stresses, is observation, not intervention. Don't argue. Just notice how someone processes info that fits their beliefs.
Okay.
Then maybe, carefully, introduce a contradictory point, something plausible, maybe from a source they usually trust, and just watch what happens.
Watch their prover kick into gear in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Defend, dismiss, rationalize.
Exactly. You start to see the mechanism. Then comes step 2, which Wilson acknowledges is much harder.
Apply it to yourself.
Apply it to yourself. And your own prover, of course, is going to resist that big time.
Naturally. So how do you get past that initial resistance?
O'Shaughnessy suggests an intermediate step, the kind of mental warm-up exercise, the green car experiment.
Like the RAS thing earlier.
Precisely. Pick something you think you rarely see O'Shaughnessy used green cars. Make a guess how many you'll see tomorrow. Then actively look for them.
And you'll probably see way more than you guessed.
Way more. He certainly did. What it does is it viscerally demonstrates the power of focus and, crucially, how much information your mind filters out constantly.
It connects to that Bhagavad Gita idea, right? You are what you believe in. You become that which you believe you can become. Your approver finds what the thinker focuses on.
Exactly. It primes you, makes the idea that your mind is filtering based on belief much more concrete.
So once you've done the green car thing, you're maybe more open to looking at your actual beliefs, starting small.
That's the idea. Start with minor things, stuff that isn't, core to your identity. Ask yourself, do I really like this band, or do I really dislike this food? Just question it gently.
Re-engage the thinker on that specific point.
Mm-hmm. And what happens next is interesting. Your prover will likely flood your mind with justifications. Of course I like them. Remember that concert? I hate that food because Mom made it badly.
All the reasons why you hold the belief.
But if you stay with it, actively think about it, you might start to see the real origins. Maybe it was social pressure. Maybe it is just habit. Maybe it's tied to an old memory totally unrelated to the thing itself.
You're bringing it back from the prover's automatic defense system into the thinker's workspace for review.
Precisely. And as you do this more, you might genuinely be surprised. You start noticing things, articles, viewpoints you could have sworn you'd never seen before.
Like the prover was acting like those Men in Black flashy things.
Yeah.
Wiping them from your awareness.
It can feel like that. It's just filtering them out so effectively. O'Shaughnessy tells that funny story about someone who genuinely believed they hated peas their whole life.
Yeah.
Turned out, after doing this kind of self-query, the hate was just leftover childhood dinner table drama. Tried them again as an adult. Actually liked them.
That's amazing. A lifetime of pea avoidance gone.
It shows how powerful these unquestioned beliefs can be. But a crucial point here, don't feel stupid or foolish if you uncover things like this.
Right, because that triggers defensiveness.
Exactly. Remember Mark Twain, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Beating yourself up just makes the prover dig its heels in harder.
Okay, so that's for smaller beliefs. What about the big ones? The really foundational stuff? That feels much harder.
It is harder, definitely more challenging. This is where that Bertrand Russell quote really resonates. What we need is not the will to believe,
but the will to find out.
Yeah, that demands real intellectual honesty, a commitment to truth over comfort.
And Wilson talks about this journey potentially leading into Chapel Perilous.
Sounds ominous.
It's that unsettling mental space where your core beliefs are challenged, where your fears might live, but also where breakthroughs and real answers might be found.
Because so many of our big beliefs, we maybe never consciously chose them. They were just installed. Often, yes. Which means your prover might be diligently working based on settings that aren't actually serving you well, leading to outcomes in life that aren't optimal.
So how do you tackle those?
O'Shaughnessy brings in another Wilson technique here, a kind of meta-programming exercise. It involves writing for 10 days straight.
Okay. Writing what?
Each day, for 10 days, you write down in detail what you genuinely, sincerely want your life to look like, your ideal future. The key is don't reread the previous day's writing until after day 10.
Just write fresh each day for 10 days, then look at it all.
Right. Then you review all 10 days worth. Look for the themes, the desires, the goals that keep appearing again and again. Those are likely the sincere ones.
Sincerity is key, you mentioned.
Crucial. If you're just writing what you think you should want or what society expects, your prover won't really engage. It has to feel authentic.
Okay, so you identify the recurring, sincere desires. Then what?
Then, Wilson advised filtering out anything on that list that triggers strong emotional resistance or feels completely unrealistic right now. What's left is a list of genuinely desired outcomes you can actually start moving towards.
And the idea is This list basically reprograms your prover, gives it new targets.
That's the concept. By consciously identifying and focusing on these sincere desires, you turn the prover on to start finding ways to make them happen. It starts working for you, often in the background.
So you might start noticing opportunities, information, connections related to those goals that you just didn't see before. Like the green cars again, but for life goals.
Exactly. You might be genuinely surprised by the new things that seem to appear in your reality simply because your prover is now attuned to them.
It's really about consciously designing your own mental models, isn't it? Instead of just accepting the defaults from parents or school or the media.
Precisely. It connects to Wittgenstein's idea. To understand is to know what to do. And Naval Ravikant saying truth should be predictive. If your perceptions get sharper, more aligned with reality.
Your actions become more effective. Your life outcomes improve.
Which then positively reinforces the prover that this way of thinking works. It creates a positive feedback loop.
O'Shaughnessy shared his own experience with this, right? That list he made.
Yeah, back in 1989, a list of 63 items. Many seemed like long shots at the time, but years later, she found a surprisingly large number of them had actually happened.
Wow.
His big takeaway was focus on the what you want to achieve or experience. Don't get bogged down in the how it will happen or who needs to be involved. Let the prover work on finding those paths.
And keep the list current, right?
Yeah.
Remove things that aren't really you anymore.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic process. Beliefs and desires change.
So ultimately, this whole framework, thinker, prover, reality, tunnels, it's not an endpoint. It's more like a starting point for real self-change.
Exactly. As O'Shaughnessy concludes, understanding this is just the beginning. The responsibility, the work of actually engaging with your own mind, that lies with you, the listener.
It's an invitation, really, to explore these ideas more, take a more active role in shaping how you see and interact with the world.
So maybe as you go about your day after listening, just take a moment now and then. Observe your thoughts. Notice the beliefs that pop up.
Yeah.
And just consider that subtle dance between your thinker and your prover. Ask yourself gently, what might my prover be filtering out right now? What possibilities might be just outside my current view?
A powerful question to sit with.